Well, a UN study of 10,000 men in Asia and the Pacific, released today, found that nearly half of the men interviewed admitted to using physical and/or sexual violence against a female partner. Nearly a quarter of men perpetrated rape against a woman or a girl. Men were interviewed across 9 countries in Bangladesh, Cambodia, China, Indonesia, Sri Lanka and Papua New Guinea. The study is entitled, "Why do some men use violence against women and how can we prevent it?" Well, to talk about that, here's the report's author, Emma Fulu, who's in Bangkok for us. Thank you very much for joining us on GMT. I mean, those figures, one in 4 men admitting to some sort of violence, 1 in 10 admitting to rape. I mean, they're so shocking. I just wonder how you managed to get them to admit that. I mean, what was the method of your survey?
Yes, well, it was a really a challenging process in a sense, but we made a concerted effort to ensure that collecting this data was as accurate as possible. And one way that we did that was by actually using new technology, iPod touches, with specifically programmed apps in local languages that enabled men to answer these questions in a totally anonymous format. And so that's why we've been able to collect this data really for the first time in the world on this scale.
So what about answering the question in the title of your report? I mean, it seems like a massive task given that what you found, but how do you prevent this?
Well, our study found that, in fact, violence is preventable. And it really highlighted, by talking to men for the first time, we really started to understand what are the underlying causes of violence. And that really points us in the direction of how we can prevent it. So with 3 key things, I think, that we can really do to prevent violence. And the first thing we found is we really needed to address gender inequality and the acceptance of violence in many of these communities. But secondly, we also need to address men's own experiences of violence, because we found, for example, men who had experienced violence as children were much more likely to perpetrate violence against women later in life. And then thirdly, we found a lot of the factors associated with violence related to men's ideas about what it means to be a man, being linked to toughness and dominance and control over women. So we think we need to work with young boys in particular to really change this idea of what it means to be a man, so that it's more caring.
Let me just take the last point, this idea of the tough man. I mean, if you're going to deal with that and you're going to start with boys, I mean, you are talking about a generational change. So, I mean, are you ready for for this to take 10, 15, 20 years?
Yes, I think that is the reality, that unfortunately there is no quick fix to this problem. We are talking about long-term sustained effort that we need to make at all different levels, from individuals, communities and governments, to be able to really make an indent into the issue of violence against women. So yes, we are talking about globally prioritising this issue and prioritising prevention for the long haul.
Emma Fulu, I guess there's a lot of people are going to be very thankful for your research, and thank you for being with us here on GMT.